let's talk to Jonathan, pronouns he, him, calling in from Chivalrous Aardvark. Talking about a guy with a long tongue and a lot of honor, who wants to know how evolution does not violate the laws of entropy. Jonathan, you are on the line with Forrest and Austin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you guys for taking my call.
Thank you for calling.
What does your question mean, Jonathan?
My question is, how does the law of entropy not violate, or how does evolution not violate the second law of entropy, or the second law of thermodynamics, which is the law of entropy?
Thermodynamics.
Right,
yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
This
Okay.
whole thing. Yeah. Yep. So really quickly, can you tell us, like, what is your understanding of the second law of thermodynamics?
So my understanding is that the universe goes from an organized state to a less organized state. So final entropy is always greater than initial entropy. And entropy basically describes the dispersion of energy. So energy tends to spread out. So convection, right? So when heat is transferred, it is dispersed. That is the fundamental idea of entropy, is the dispersion of heat, the dispersion of energy, and the dispersion of organized structure.
Sure. So like that's good enough to work with, because like I'm not a physicist, so I'm not prepared to like super get in nitty gritty, but I can say I can agree with some of that. That the concept of the second law of thermodynamics is that in a closed system, that we tend toward disorder. So it's not just always chaos. It's just to say that you're not going to see heat spontaneously moving from a cold thing into an already hot thing. It will spontaneously seek equilibrium. And the key here is that we're talking about a closed system, right? And the Earth is not a closed system. The Earth has the sun, which is adding energy to us all the time, which is fueling a huge amount of how life works on this planet. But even without that, you can have pockets of order spontaneously arise within a system, just like as long as it's not like the whole
very simplistic scale, only simplistic scale.
Maybe,
right? You can't have anything
wanted to agree with it, but it doesn't.
Right?
But it doesn't really matter.
A crystal is a very simple structure. The structure of, for example, a soap molecule, it has an organization, but it's very simple. When you look at things like the living human cell, that's way farther from a soap molecule or an ice crystal.
The issue is that cells and soap and all these things, they are still obeying the same laws of physics and chemistry. Like the individual functions, no matter how complex you want to say a cell is, the individual functions within a cell are obeying the exact same laws of physics and chemistry as everything else. And so when you look at this thing and you want to say this is, some sort of a disruption in this law of entropy, well, by the definition that you gave earlier and by this framework, then so would like any planet. Like planets forming is creating order out of the random chaos that could just be a scattering of atoms. But because gravity exists, planets exist. And so like by obeying the same laws of physics and chemistry, you can create remarkable organization, streams, rivers, mountains, plate tectonics, like all these things that seem pretty complicated and seem pretty intricate on a planetary scale come out of the same physics that creates the entropy that you're talking about. And then what's more important to point out is that like when we're talking about this stuff, we're talking about life. Evolution follows like the most basic logical progression. If you understand heredity and you understand like just anything at all about ecology, your evolution naturally follows. At least neo-Darwinian evolution naturally follows. And it follows in such a way that it doesn't violate any kind of thermodynamic law. It actually makes more sense. It is more parsimonious. It is more simple. It better falls in line with Occam's razor to say that evolution is going to work. than saying that it should trend towards
That's
chaos.
an opinion. That's an opinion. I don't
It's
think
not.
so at all.
And
And a lot of people
I almost
don't.
guarantee you would hold the same opinion. Let me walk you through it then.
Well, can I refute some of the things you've already said? A lot of things that I disagree with, and I want to at least have a conversation.
Sure. But then I'm going to tell you about how evolution works, and I guarantee you're going to agree with me.
All right. So you say that the closed system versus open system argument, and you say, oh, we have energy from the sun. That changes everything. That means we can get more organized things. When you add energy to something, that doesn't organize it. If you set off a bomb, oh, we get all this energy. Did it organize anything? It increases the entropy catastrophically. You're 100% wrong.
What would happen? What would happen if you set off a bomb in space?
Well, it's a vacuum, so I don't know. Would it do anything?
Yeah. So what if you took something in space and you exploded it? You blew the pieces all over the place. You created massive chaos in outer space. What would happen next?
It would continue to disperse.
No. Because of gravity, you would have heavy chunks attract smaller chunks, and you would end up with things clustering together and becoming more organized than they were during the explosion.
Right. So
it's a bad example.
You use gravity and you get a round ball. I'm talking about how does a living cell come from random molecules, right? So you see how there's
random.
levels to entropy.
They're not random as how.
Natural selection.
Now we're talking about abiogenesis.
Everything started off molecules, right?
Everything still is molecules.
There's a chance.
Abiogenesis, right?
Right. That's what it sounds like you're getting to. And the problem here is that you're saying that like a bomb exploding is going to create a lot of chaos. Yeah, sure. A supernova is the biggest bomb in the universe, creates a lot of chaos. It's also where we get lots and lots of heavy elements that create things like planets and people. So like we from that chaos, you still get order. Even if you take evolution out of the question, the biggest explosions in the universe are where we get the ingredients for life.
You got a round planet, incredible. Explain a living cell.
Yeah, we got a planet which happens to be stocked with all the things that make life. Totally natural
random
processes.
Molecules. Now take that and then go and make a living cell. Right, there's a big difference in entropy, a big difference in organization.
That's a better existence.
Cell is so easy to fall apart and to break. A living animal is so easy to have not all of its parts work perfectly. That's
so. Let's
life.
Austin, it sounds like you had something, and then I have something too.
I was just going to say life is incredibly rare in the known universe and in the parts of the universe that we've been able to look at, which is obviously incredibly small. So life could be the universe could be teeming with life that we just have not seen in the small amount that we've looked at. But as far as we can tell in our immediate solar system and star system, planetary system, there's a very, very, kind of narrow set of qualifications that a planet needs in order to be able to host life. And then life seems to be this kind of unique characteristic that this floating orb has that we don't seem to observe on.
That didn't answer my question about entropy.
I know. I'm getting there. Shut the fuck up. I'm getting there. How about you just let me talk for a second? So there might be a more philosophical component to what you're asking than just the nature of how physics works and entropy works.
Physics.
Hey, Jonathan, shut up. I'm talking. We might be talking about determinism here. So, the law of determinism is kind of like an object in motion, stays in motion unless it is acted upon by another by another force. It's everything in the universe is following a causal chain that can be linked back to the Big Bang. That just everything that's happening is just the result of prior sort of something needs to be, you're alive because your dad fucked your mom and a sperm made it into the egg, and like everything is deterministic, right? Everything is just cause and effect. There is no actual choice in the matter, and everything that formulates the way that you think about the world is just the result of a bunch of data. But there are also philosophical propositions and hypotheses that say that living things might be something in the universe called agents that are able to break causal chains or create causal chains. So when we talk about the laws of thermodynamics and saying that things are going to seek equilibrium over time through entropy, yeah, in a vacuum, in a controlled system, they might. But enter the kind of wild card of life, this thing that can exist in the universe, that these agents that can create causal chains, and these like molecules, these bacteria that we're trying to fight for survival, and that happened to be on a planet that had the right ingredients for life. And as they're trying to figure out what they need to do to survive and grow and adapt, you have the process of evolution, and those things could, hypothetically and philosophically work in tandem with each other. I'm just proposing that concept.
And now that you propose it, I'm happy to walk through how that happens. But like we'll get there. I always want to hear Jonathan's response first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of any of that, honestly. I guess it went over my head. But I was talking about physics, and you were talking about theories, or
yeah,
I
was talking about metaphysics and philosophy. I was talking about, I was saying that there might be a marriage of the two. I was just sort of proposing the concept that in those fixed laws that you're concerned about, laws of thermodynamics and like entropy, of like, well, these things will seek order over time, and as they expand out, I'm saying, well, what if there are other elements at play here? Forrest already kind of brought this up with the difference between a closed system and an unclosed, a system that has.
Yeah.
So I'm
Do you
just
have
saying,
any like leads on what that is so I can understand it better? Like,
I'll be completely honest with you. I'll be completely candid with you. I don't actually know where I stand on determinism versus the potential that living things might be deterministic, or that they might be mostly deterministic but have certain qualities that allow them to create causal chains that wouldn't have otherwise existed without them. I don't actually know where I stand on it.
you talk about like manifestation?
I'm talking about
like
how I'm talking about whether or not choice exists. Like I'm talking about whether or not you're actually. I know, yeah, but this is philosophy we're talking about. I'm talking about like whether or not like you're actually able to choose what you crave. Like if you are thinking, oh, I'm hungry and what do I want to eat? And like, why does the idea of a pizza pop into your head instead of the idea of a hamburger? And do you actually have agency in that process? And I'm talking about philosophy here because
Less
a lot
than
of
you
people.
think.
Yeah. So pure determinism would say, no, you have absolutely no choice in that. You are just the product of a never-ending chain of cause and effect going all the way back to the Big Bang. And I think that there's a lot of credence to that concept. But then there's also another element here that says that the universe might be like 99.9999999% deterministic and purely deterministic, but that living things have some component where they are able to change causal pathways. They're able to do things that change causal pathways. And this could be kind of the difference between like where there might be a fixed law in thermodynamics of how an object will behave in a closed system, but then given the influence of something that comes into that closed system and interrupts it, it can change. And that might be what answers your question of like, if you introduce the phenomenon of life, then these laws are going to behave slightly different than they would otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yes, but that actually kind of helps my point, because what you're saying is that you need a life. Well, my big question, or my big point, is how impossibly hard abiogenesis is. So you're saying, okay, well, let's just get a living cell, and then we can go from there. But the living cell has so many complex. Can I just speak for a second, please?
Sure.
The living cell has so many complex parts within it. Mitochondria are not simple. Chromatin, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. If you go in there with a scalpel,
why just the smooth
and
one?
you remove if you remove the smooth endoplasmic reticulum with a scalpel, will the cell die? Or that goes for all the other parts, the mitochondria. So you remove one little incredibly beautiful part of a cell that does something incredibly important and specific. It doesn't exist. So how do you go from a bunch of cells to an interdependent, complex living cell that has so many different factories, and it's got motor proteins that are just zipping along, moving things on chains that go all over the place. I mean, it's absolutely breathtaking.
So, Jonathan, what you've just introduced here is the idea of irreducible complexity, which is just lazy thinking, is what it is. It's lazy thinking trying to be framed as science. You're saying that you don't know enough about where these things come from, therefore, it's magic. And like, what's frustrating about it is that you're talking about all these parts of the cell. You're talking about all these parts. Well, you're calling in as a theist, presumably pushing creationism, right? You're saying that this couldn't have possibly evolved. God did it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So magic, yeah. So, but like the point is that's really not the point of what we're getting at. Is that by saying this irreducible complexity stuff, what you're doing is you're pointing at
you're the one pointing to because you're saying evolution.
Jonathan,
don't you get how you're the one refuting your own beliefs?
Jonathan, you're gonna have to listen to the whole thing. So, by claiming this irreducible complexity point, I'm going to put you on mute for just a second so you can quit whining long enough to listen. So the thing with irreducible complexity is that you are looking at these things as they currently are today after 4 billion years of evolution and saying they're so remarkably complex they never could have gotten started in the first place. And that's intellectually lazy. That's just not how it demonstrates that you've never taken the time to think seriously about this. And maybe you've never taken the time to learn about this, which again, I can't stress enough, is fine. Not everybody has to go to school for this stuff. It's weird. So like, don't be upset about it if you don't know it, but don't come at us and say like, everything's this way now, so it can't be any other way. That's just, it sucks. Now, I'm going to take you off mute. So that way you can participate if you'd like. But you've been talking this whole time about abiogenesis. That's what we've been kind of hinging on here for the minute. I'm going to go over abiogenesis with you and why it makes sense. And then we're going to go to when I said I'm going to walk you through evolution, and I guarantee you'll agree with it. I haven't forgotten about that. We're going to do that too. Okay. So we're going to start with abiogenesis, how life gets started. Then we're going to talk about evolution, which is what happens after it gets started. We're going to do both of these things in record time.
Okay.
First of all,
before you even say that, when you say a point, can I just at least have time to maybe put in one sentence?
I mean, if you really want to, but I don't think it's going to be useful.
Okay. Well, I want to have a conversation. I mean, I thought this was a show where people had conversations.
Well, if you say something silly, we're going to have to refute it and then move on. Otherwise, it's boring for the audience.
Do that then. Okay.
I did.
That's okay, what he's trying to do.
It's exactly what I just did before you just interrupted me and asked to speak. I'm just going to move on, Jonathan. We're just going to keep going. We're going to talk about abiogenesis now. So,
hey, can we have a conversation though? Wait, can we have a conversation though?
No, we fucking can't. Apparently,
hold on. Before you answer the question that I asked, can I say stuff?
Right.
Because I want to have a conversation. All right, because I want you to. I want to ask questions, and then I want you to say things. But then I want to be able to interrupt you and say, "Hey, I want to ask questions."
No.
You know, can we have a conversation here? Hold on. Wait a minute, Jonathan. Hold on, Jonathan. I want to be able to talk. I want to be able to talk too, in between. When you're trying to answer the things that I asked.
It's not going to get us anywhere. It's going to get us nowhere fast. Yeah. So first thing you need to understand, Jonathan, is that life got started, we know, at the very latest 3.8 billion years ago. That is, there's good evidence that it was a little bit earlier than that. But that is at the absolute latest, like within a couple 100,000 years after the end of the Hadean, which is to say fucking immediately. As soon as the planet wasn't just molten lava hellscape, life begins
and that was
right
bacteria,
away.
Correct?
No, it would have been like very, very simple things. Like even modern day bacteria would be fundamentally way more complex than those things would have been.
So we don't know. We're talking about have any data on it.
Likely would have been closer to Archaea. Likely, no, we do. It likely would have been closer to Archaea, but even like the oldest fossils that we have are bacterial. They're things we call stromatolites, which are billions of years old. So what we've got right away, we know that the earliest evidence of life is like immediately from the point when life is even remotely possible. another thing to know that I think is important about abiogenesis is that there are four major macromolecules that make up literally every living thing. Those are proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. The things that make those things, and I am so oversimplifying a bit for the sake of brevity here, are amino acids make proteins, the fatty acids make lipids, sugars make carbohydrates, and nitrogenous bases make nucleic acids. The crazy thing is that all of those things have been demonstrated to self-assemble in lab and field settings. We have found all of those things in space, self-assembled all by themselves on asteroids and comets and shit out in space, where nobody can accuse any corrupt scientist of tweaking the knobs and contaminating the jars or anything like that. We find all of those things in space. And there is a lot of problems like, okay, we find the blocks, the building blocks, but how do they polymerize? How do they form the thing? Well, we're finding that too. Modern experiments have shown that amino acids polymerize into basic peptides on the surface attention of microdroplets of water, which is what you would expect to find in ocean spray around tide pools, which is where the rest of modern evidence points to abiogenesis happening. We find oligoribonucleotides, which are simple stretches of RNA, very, very basic nucleic acids, forming from the very same kind of nitrogenous bases we find on meteorites all the time. And by the way, we found all 5 possible of those. I should come back to that in a second. We find that they polymerize around like certain minerals and whatnot, which are also abundant on the planet around us. I mentioned a second ago, I wanted to circle back. We have found there are 5 possible nitrogenous bases, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. We have found all 5 of those on meteorites. There are 20 amino acids required to make life. We have found over 500 different types of amino acids out in nature, out in space. So like the pieces that we need to make life are abundant. They self-assemble under very mundane conditions, and they self-polymerize. And again, what's most important is that the way that they come together to form cells and the things that they do when they are in cells all follow the most basic laws of physics and chemistry. Lipids are gonna form if you have phospholipids, they are going to form a bilayer exactly like what you have in a cell membrane. If you have non-phospholipids, just basic lipids, they are going to form bubbles, which are the exact kind of things that you would expect to find in protocells. If you have like RNA, which we just demonstrated, the oligoribonucleotides can self-assemble.
Complex structures.
You're gonna have to let me finish. If you have oligoribonucleotides, which I just explained, can self-assemble. Okay, Jonathan, you are skipping 30 different steps in order to ignore what I'm saying to you. You're going to have to calm the fuck down. If you have oligoribonucleotides, which I just explained, can self-assemble, the cool thing about RNA is that it's not only genetic material, it is also a catalyst for tons of biochemical reactions, and also plays a major part in epigenetics, which plays a major part in evolutionary change. And so, like, you've got not only the stuff that makes life, but the stuff that stuff makes as well, and life itself, and the things, the basic functions of life, all being demonstrated to have natural origins and follow natural laws. Now, what you just did, weirdly, and just really rudely, is to say, abiogenesis doesn't make any sense, it's impossible. And then after I just spent probably about 4 minutes explaining all the main parts of it that you need to understand to get why it makes sense, you then took a flying fucking leap 3 billion years ahead and said, well, that doesn't explain empathy. Do you understand why that's a totally inappropriate and irrelevant thing to say in this moment, Jonathan?
No, because how complicated.
Okay, well then let me explain it to you then really quickly. The reason why that's a totally inappropriate and irrelevant thing to say in this situation is that we are talking about how the very first cells get started. We're not talking about empathy. We need to cover evolution first. So it's ridiculous to say that I don't accept abiogenesis because that doesn't account for empathy. It's like saying I don't believe that cars are real because I don't understand how combustion works. We can cover combustion, that doesn't tell us how an engine is built, that doesn't tell us about our angular momentum of wheels, that doesn't tell us about all the other things that go into cars, right? So for you to sit here and say, I don't get combustion, and then when I start to explain how combustion reactions work, you go, well, that doesn't tell you how Henry Ford made the assembly line. That's fucking dumb, right? Does that make sense?
Okay, so you're saying that natural selection is what made these organelles, but what my point is, how complex does it need to be in order to reproduce? Because you can only have natural selection when you have something that's reproduced.
Yeah, there were you're like he's trying to explain to you 4 billion years of a.
I will answer that, but I'm gonna let Austin talk.
He's giving you the answer, but like exactly his example right there. It's like you're asking, like, walk me through every single part of the process of how a car is built. And so he's like, all right, I'm going to start with like how you build a nut that like you screw on to like little like metal nuts. And he's like, so here's the process of creating like metal alloy and then forming it into molds to create. And like he walks you through that process, and he's just getting to like how the cooling process of a nut. And you're like, that doesn't explain a Corvette. And it's like, hold on. We have not even we have so many more steps to get to. Like, let me get like, you asked me to walk you through and it's actually like the example that I'm giving you of like how to build a car. It's actually like that times 100,000 because we're talking about 4 billion. He already gave you the process of like, well, we've done experiments that show that the 4 basic building blocks of light. Yes, because we've done experiments that show that they assemble. We've done experiments that show that they autonomously assemble. We can demonstrate that. You stupid fuck. Like that's
it is.
That's the whole fucking point. You said they couldn't do it without an engineer. And then we go, yes, they can. And you go, well, just the building blocks. If I showed you that a nut for a car can self-assemble, would you not be impressed by that? If I showed you an example of like, watch, I'm going to lay out this metal alloy and it's going to form itself into a nut that I can then put on a tire. You're telling me you wouldn't be impressed because it's not a Corvette yet? Jesus fucking Christ. But like
no,
so you asked a second ago. Jonathan, you're real hung up on the fucking analogy, and it sucks. It's just an analogy, dude. Here's the thing: is that you then asked after I just explained to you. Yeah, I'm getting that. You literally interrupted me when I was saying the question you just asked was this, and you're like, you didn't answer my question. Holy fuck, calm down. So the question you asked a second ago was how complex this stuff need to be to self-assemble. Literally, we have seen RNA, which is the thing that I just explained to you, self-assemble. Oh my fucking God, dude. Calm down and let me finish the sentence. You're talking about self-assembly and then you're talking about reproduction. We talked about self-assembly. Now you want to know about reproduction. RNA, the thing that I just explained to you, can self-assemble. We have seen it self-replicate as well. In laboratory and field settings, it does it by itself. Yes, RNA can self-reproduce. And as I just mentioned, RNA is not only genetic material, it is also a catalyst for a ton of biochemical reactions. And it also plays a major role in evolution. There's like 50 different types of RNA, and some of them play a big role in epigenetics, and some of them play a big role in like just basic Darwinian or neo-Darwinian evolution. They do a bunch of different stuff. Some of them can even you talk about like mutation selection mechanism. MicroRNA can do post-transcriptional gene regulation. Like, that's fucking nutty, you know? And so like you have this stuff which is able to do remarkably complex stuff on its own and also produce remarkably complex emergent properties when combined with the other parts of the cell, which I just mentioned, also self-assemble. So yes, we have seen these things self-assemble and they can self-replicate. All of those things have been demonstrated to be natural processes. Now,
how many
are you ready to move
did the
on?
DNA have that self
oh my fucking God. And now we just got to go to the next fucking thing. It's a silly ass question.
How big this strand of DNA is.
Does it matter? And also, it's not DNA, it's RNA that we're talking about. We haven't even gotten to DNA yet.
It doesn't matter how complex it is.
Jonathan, do you want this call to take 4 billion years? Like, is that like what we have to do? Do we have to give you a 4 billion year long answer where like I'm like, and then what? And then what? And then what? And like, we could do it, but like every single premise that you've said cannot be demonstrated. After it's demonstrated, you just go, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And then Forrest continues to answer the questions in as good a faith as possible.
So just to be clear, can we agree, like, do you accept that amino acids and sugars and basic fatty acids and nitrogenous bases, do you accept that all of those things self-assemble?
The molecules can be made, yeah, the molecules can be formed naturally.
Holy fuck, that was a complicated answer for a simple yes or no question. Do you accept that they have also been demonstrated to be able to self-polymerize under natural conditions?
Self-polymerize means what?
Means they form like the long chain molecules, because a protein isn't just a random bunch of amino acids. It's amino acids connected together in a string, and then that folds up and does some stuff. We're going to get to that in a minute. But polymerizing, forming the long chains that make the actual macromolecules that make life.
Yeah, according to chemistry, if there is a bunch of them in a dense amount, they would attach to each other. But you would, in order to get
under certain conditions, which we have demonstrated, yes. So again, not looking for a whole fucking thing. These are yes or no questions. Do you understand and accept that RNA self-replicates?
Yeah. I don't know how complicated it is, but
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter right now. We're not at that part yet. So what we have here are all the building blocks of life forming and doing life things all by themselves. Now let's skip forward a little bit, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend like we know every single thing there is to know about abiogenesis. We don't. We just have extremely strong evidence for how it works, and like no reason at all to think that it's not a natural process. Let's get into life itself, because your initial question here is about evolution. So let's talk about evolution for a second. Now we've gotten past abiogenesis, as if that matters for evolution. Yeah, take your time, man. I'll be doing this for 3 seconds. Yep. We dig into evolution now. 3 things that we're going to see if you can agree with. Number 1, you do agree, of course, that DNA exists, that DNA is heritable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Second thing is that you understand that DNA is broken up into genes. Those genes have different flavors, what we call alleles, different types of the same genes. And so we understand that it comes in different styles.
Okay. Yep.
You agree with that? Okay. Do you also agree that different alleles are better suited for life in different environments?
Yes.
Okay, so then you understand the basic concepts of evolution by natural selection and how it does not violate the laws of entropy. If you have living things that are reproducing in differential environments, then different alleles are going to be expressed in different frequencies within different populations, and you're going to have evolutionary change that doesn't violate the law of entropy at all. That is how evolution works.
Yeah, I think evolution has a massive amount of assumptions all the way through, though.
So I'm going to ask you to just address what I actually just said, not the next thing you want to say. So please address what I just said.
Would you say natural selection or something?
Okay, so you weren't listening. You weren't even listening to what I fucking said. Great. So I'm going to try one more time, Jonathan. Yeah, we just covered that DNA is passed down from parent to offspring, that DNA isn't ubiquitous. It comes in different styles and flavors. Different alleles exist, right? And we covered that different alleles are better suited for life in different environments. With those 3 axioms that you and I agreed are real, right? The logical conclusion then is that in different environments, you're going to get expressions of different alleles. You're going to have different allele frequencies because certain individuals are going to die off and certain individuals are going to reproduce more and are going to have a better life and all these things. This is what we call differential reproduction and survival, literally the definition of natural selection. So that's what we were talking about there. So the question was, do you see how that is the logical conclusion of those 3 axioms and how it doesn't violate anything to do with entropy?
No, I think it violates entropy because the organelles are incredibly complex.
What part of
And
what
then-
we just talked about, Jonathan, what part of those three axioms that we just covered talks about organelles at all?
It doesn't. That's why I'm saying you have massive assumptions in evolution.
So,
don't address.
So we're going to go back to the question I actually asked. We're not the question you wanted me to ask, not the next thing on your list that you want to talk. The question I asked was, based on the things that we just agreed to, that DNA is passed on from parent to offspring, that different alleles exist, and that there's a differential success of different alleles in different environments, isn't the next logical step that you're going to have differences in allele frequencies in populations in different environments? And that doesn't violate anything to do with the law of entropy. Yes or no?
Yes, because you've passed biogenesis.
Right, because evolution and abiogenesis are different things, right? You know that they're different things, right?
Yeah, it's a lot easier to explain evolution than abiogenesis.
Right, and we just got done with like 20 minutes of explaining abiogenesis and why it makes logical sense as well. So what you keep doing here, Jonathan, is we keep getting to how evolution is like obviously logically true. And that's why I said earlier that I guarantee you'll agree, and you just did, that these three things and the basics of natural selection make logical sense. And when you bump up against this wall of irrefutable logic, you just pick another thing that you don't like. Like, well, that doesn't tell us where organelles come from. We didn't talk about it. We haven't gotten there yet. Well, that doesn't tell us everything about abiogenesis. We don't know everything about abiogenesis yet. We just know like 8 out of 10 theoretical steps, and we're damn certain that this is a natural process. Because again, that also follows logical steps. If the things that make life can be demonstrated to self-assemble, and if it can be demonstrated they make macromolecules all by themselves, and if it can be demonstrated those natural macromolecules do everything that they do inside of a cell by natural processes as well, all of those are true, then it makes sense logically to say that abiogenesis is also a natural process. But that's neither here nor there, because again, can't stress this enough, that's a different question. The thing we're talking about now is evolution. This makes sense. Okay. Natural selection makes sense. And difference in the organelles makes sense.
But Forrest,
pardon me.
Evolution makes sense. Now,
Forrest, have you ever seen like a tiger shark though? What's that about?
Right, and I guess that means God is real.
I bet you can't tell me what a tiger shark is made out of.
Right. I bet you can't tell me how the bombardier beetle evolved.
I bet I can tell you where you heard about the bombardier beetle. Was it Michael Behe's dumbass?
I love that you did the thing that I was doing. I love that you did it.
Jonathan, you got it from Michael. You got it from.
Can I explain it a little?
Jonathan. No, you can't. Jonathan, you got it from Michael Behe and the fucking Discovery Institute, who, by the way, a little while ago, when I told you that what you were doing was talking about irreducible complexity, and irreducible complexity is fucking dumb, Michael Behe is the fucking guy who came up with the idea of irreducible complexity and coined the term, and was thoroughly embarrassed in the scientific community for not only just being thoroughly uninformed about what evolution actually was in the first place, but also the wealth of literature and the evolution of everything that he ever said is impossible to evolve. So, like, I don't think you're serious about this. You've listened to the Discovery Institute and Answers in Genesis rather than actual scientists. And it's very clear that when we come up to these points where these things actually make irrefutable sense to you, you just jump to the next everlasting thought stopper rather than actually grappling with the evidence in front of you.
It's not a thought stopper. I'm just talking about all of your things that you don't want to talk about. Is that not fair?
No, Jonathan,
what don't I want to talk about so far?
Like I said,
do you want the bombardier beetle? I guarantee it.
No, he absolutely can talk about the fucking bombardier.
He's afraid of the bombardier.
Oh my God, Jonathan, he's answered every single one of your stupid fucking questions. This is why I said, do you want the call to take 4 billion years? Yes, he has. You've agreed. He's been like, do you agree with this?
You've agreed with the things I've said.
So are you satisfied? No, because I have another goalpost.
All the things that you assume and that you dodge and that you don't want to talk about. You don't want to talk about the complex organelles. You don't want to talk about the bombardier beetle, incredibly complex system.
Jonathan, you're not a serious person.
If he didn't have it all
Jonathan,
I'm just muting him for a second.
You're not a serious person, man. Like the problem is with it's the exact same thing with like KD. And that the reason why I said, do you want the call to be 4 billion years long is because what you're doing is just every new time your next question gets thoroughly answered. Every new time Forrest patiently walks through the process of answering your question. You've just, instead of, like, you even said, like, do you have a response to that? At one point you went, I didn't hear what you said, because you were just thinking of the next thing you wanted to say. You were just like, well, I've got another thing in my back pocket. And the reason I said, should it take 4 billion years is because that's with the tactics that you're employing, that's how long we could be here. You could just keep saying the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You could just keep going like, I don't know, have you ever seen some of these lizards out there? They're pretty complex, dude. Explain to me how an iguana's skin changes color. How's that happen without a god? Like, you're just going to keep cycling through the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and insisting that there's no explanation for it outside of God. And we could be here doing that literally ad nauseum. Like, we could be here doing that for longer than the term of any one of our natural lives. And unless at some point you're going to go, okay, you have answered 50 of my questions, I think that's enough. Maybe that's enough for me to accept that, like, maybe I don't know about as much about this topic as I thought I did. But you're not willing to do that. So why, like, what's the point in continuing to go on with you? That's where I'm at. Sorry if I'm out of line here.
Yeah, let me. No, you're fine. I have a question for Jonathan. Like, as you just said, like, not to my satisfaction, as if you hadn't been agreeing with the things that I was saying, and even at one point said, yes, evolution makes sense. Like, just out of curiosity, is there anything that I could say that would make you say, you know what? I understand evolution and abiogenesis are absolutely accurate, true, natural processes. Those things are real.
It's not as much what someone can say, but is what they can show. For example, if they were able to show more things with abiogenesis and organelle.
Let me ask you a different question. Let me ask you a different question. We established earlier that you are calling in as a creationist, saying that God did all of these things. These are all evidence of design, right?
Yes.
Okay, so here's where we're at. I have just demonstrated that we have a thorough understanding of, like, a tremendous amount of what these elements are, what the molecules these elements make are, how these molecules form even more complex molecules by natural processes, how those complex molecules form macromolecules by natural processes, how those macromolecules behave within cells and reproduce by themselves and do all the things that keep every living cell alive by natural processes. And also, we've demonstrated what DNA is, how it functions, where it goes. You're going to have to shut the fuck up while I'm speaking, Jonathan. We've demonstrated what DNA is, how it operates, how it changes, how it mutates. We've demonstrated both pre-transcriptional and post-transcriptional gene control. We've demonstrated every possible function of how evolution works, except for all the ones we have. Like, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot that we're still learning, but we've demonstrated every possible function of how evolution works in order to understand beyond a shadow of a doubt that it fucking works. That we've got down for sure. Now, you may not accept this massive body of understanding that we have, but you can't deny that we do have it. So now my question to you, Jonathan, is where is your equally impressive body of evidence for God creating stuff?
There is no evidence of God creating stuff because He hides himself in a great mystery.
Exactly, and that's where we are.
Thank you.
So here we are demonstrating everything there is to know about this stuff, and your actual argument is, nuh-uh, I think the space wizard did it. And that's all you fucking have. I don't get why this is a serious thing for you, because it's pretty obvious to me that it's not serious.
How crazy for Forrest to do all that work for you to say you haven't answered questions to my satisfaction. And when you're asked the question, do you have any evidence whatsoever for your claim that everything was made by God? You just go, No, because he deliberately hides himself in a mystery. What the fuck, dude? Like,
yeah, it's just if I sat, I
that's
guarantee,
so fucking
Jonathan,
insane.
if I sat here,
that's so fucking insane.
If I sat here and explained to you that evolution can't be observed or tested because it's all mysterious, you would never accept it. You have a different kind of thinking for your God than you do for absolutely anything else ever. And for that reason, I can't take you or any other creationist seriously, because you would have to demonstrate that this God exists, that the God can create things, then that the God did create things, then we need to talk about how it created things, then we need to, like, there's so many things, and all you're bringing to the table is nuh-uh. That's literally all you've got. And I don't know how you take yourself seriously, because you should, like, I don't know. And with that, I'm bored. It's gone from weird to boring. And so we're going to move on. But Jonathan, feel free to call back if you ever want to try to actually grapple with what actual science actually says. And maybe we'll all learn something together. It'll be great. Bye-bye, Jonathan.
Hey, do you think this clip just fell out of a coconut tree? No. It did. Okay, now technically I did build the channel into a coconut tree and it did fall out. And also that our internet router is up there. Actually, in a lot of ways, this production fell out of a coconut tree, but we could only afford that because people like you supported us for $5 a month over where is that, Eric?
Patreon.com/call the line. And
that's right.
Jimmy will,
you got it.
Yeah, be grateful. Yeah.
We have an exclusive patron podcast over there. Check it out. Thumbs up with it, Eric. We talked about this in the meeting. We have to both.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, there we go.